start. So the coach comes out of the Royal Mews along the side of the troops and then takes its position between the household cavalry, and then everyone has to step off to ensure the coach doesn't stop, which I suppose is understandable at 4 tons.
It's wonderful, isn't it, those images? There's a great sense, I think, of lightheartedness as well as seriousness to this. The balance is going to be, I think, just perfect. At the very head of the parade, in the centre with the white swan feathers there on his hat, we see Major General Christopher Geeker. He's the Major General commanding the household division, and he will give the salute, which will be received by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales.
Yes, probably the three, some of the 3 busiest men in London this weekend, Claire. You've got General Chris Geeker in the middle there, who's just saluting, and he's flanked by his principal staff officers, Lieutenant Colonel James Shaw of the Grenadier Guards and Colonel Jeremy Bagshaw of the Coldstream Guards, and behind him Jamie Roy of the Irish Guards. Chris, of course, is an Irish Guard.
And many of these horses were involved on Thursday in the Queen's Birthday Parade. And the wind is quite breezy today, and that can sometimes get under their tails and in their ears a bit and makes them a little bit jiggy. But Major General Geeker's horse Atticus behaving beautifully.
Jiggy is what it does get. When the Queen in 1937 went to her own parents' coronation, she wrote her an account of it to give to her parents after the day, and she described the coach she was in on that day, which was a glass coach. She went with her sister. She said, at first it was very jolty, but we soon got used to it. And that, in a way, I think describes what her approach to the rain has been. At first a bit jolty, but you get used to it.
And Claire, it's quite interesting to note that I mean, none of those gentlemen that you see in red there at the front, they're guardsmen, foot guardsmen. There's a clue in the title. They're meant to stand on their feet. But of course, in days gone by, the officers were mounted, hence they're on horses. But interestingly, looking at behind them, you've got the household cavalry, and of course, they are meant to be on horses. But what's quite interesting about the household cavalry is so many of these men and women join the army, thinking they're going to join a cavalry regiment that probably got tanks and go off to war in their tanks, and they're told that actually there is an option of riding a horse. And many of them have never seen a horse, let alone got on a horse, before they join the army, the household cavalry. And they go off and do an intensive 16-week.
Well, you can see there at the back, actually, you know, having to sit tight, and not easy to do that in the boots that they wear, which are very, very stiff. I always think, as we come towards the salute, the lead group are about to reach the royal box. Same position as it was last night. You see it there with the red carpet on the left. Same position as it was last night for the concert, and there His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales receiving the salute from Major General Chris Geeker and the household division. I always think one of the most magnificent sights are the drum horses, and we've got 2 Shire horses on parade, and you will notice that obviously the drummers, they can't hold the reins, so they have to, the reins are attached to their feet, and that is how they are changing course if that needs to be done with the horses that they are riding. But Ed is the drum horse for the Blues and Royals, and he is 17 hands one. He's magnificent. There they are. And Harry for the Lifeguards is 18 hands 2. That's huge, and only finished his training last year.
And again, these gentlemen joined the army to be musicians. They didn't think for a minute they were going to be sat on a horse with their drums and their other instruments. It is a remarkable feat.
So the household cavalry, as we've mentioned, made up the 2 most senior regiments in the British Army, the Lifeguards and the Blues and Royals.
It's so ingenious, this figure of the Queen, isn't it, sitting in the royal coach, because what they're managing to do is give us in 2022 the Queen from 1953. It's extraordinary. So one of the Queen's press secretaries once said to me, "We like to think we're as modern as tomorrow with a lot of time for yesterday." And they're certainly combining that here.
I also think it's worth noting that the household cavalry that we see on their horses, of course, are soldiers first. And it's interesting to know that there have been members of the household cavalry in every military operation since the Second World War. And that's everything from Aden through the Falklands and, of course, into Iraq and Afghanistan. So soldiers first and ceremonial second.
The Blues and Royals were ahead of the gold stagecoach, and then we see the lifeguards behind them with the white plumes and the red jacket.
Led by their officer, Lieutenant Felix Pitti of the Lifeguards.
And I also think the stage here, given how different last night was with the concert and the different groups appearing either in front of the Queen Victoria Memorial or with the gates and the palace behind them, and now transformed into the stage for this pageant.
This is living history, and indeed here is living history, because as they come past, we've got Prince William, Prince George, we've got, as it were, the next generations, the story that goes on. It is true, isn't it, that the Queen is fascinated by the detail of all this. She notices the uniforms. She recognizes the different kinds of horse. When all this is for her,
and we have the King's Troop here, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. It's their 75th anniversary this year. And those guns, they've got 6 quick-firing 13-pounder guns. Different sort of horse here. You see them with the hogged mane as well. They're much smaller, chunkier, more solid, if you like.
They're led by Major Fran Sykes at the front there, and 50% of the King's Troop are women, which is a really lovely thing, and they are a fantastic outfit, named the King's Troop because King George VI suggested that they should be on ceremonial parades, and from that day on they've been on parades, and in honor of her father, Her Majesty has left them as the King's Troop.
Would it be controversial to mention that Major Fran Sykes is riding a horse called Yornbury Dawdle, but has a stable name of Boris? Not sure one should say that or not, but anyway, he's a 7-year-old gelding.
Well, and he was the quickest to pass out of training. It only took him 6 months. Quite a character he is, likes attention and eating the plumes on the officers' busbies. I went actually they're based in Woolwich now, the King's Troop. They used to be in St John's Wood, and I've been and seen the riding lessons that they give. And it's quite an intense program that they go through, and they've got a fantastic indoor arena, but plenty of cases of falling off and getting back on again.
And you actually don't want to fall off when you've got one of those guns coming up behind you.
We move on now to the Royal Marines Band, leading the naval contingent in the Royal Marines Band service. We've got representatives from HMS Collingwood and the band of Her Majesty's Royal Marines Commando Training Centre in Lympstone.
And again, there's a theme here. Of course, they're musicians, and they're outstanding musicians, but also at times of war, they put their musical instruments down and they pick up their stretchers and drive ambulances, and they become frontline medics.
Her Majesty the Queen is Commander-in-Chief of the Royal Navy, and late Duke of Edinburgh was Lord High Admiral.
I think previously she was the Lord High Admiral. When he got to one of his special birthdays,
90th birthday.
she wanted to give him something, and she looked in her bottom drawer. She found he'd got everything already, so she took off her own Lord High Admiral's badge and thought, well, you can have this. You deserve it.
I was being told an anecdote by a friend of mine whose father was in the Royal Marines. James Hardy's father was in the Royal Marines, and those pith helmets in the days of the coronation, they used the blanco. They used to put white stuff on them to keep them white, and of course the coronation was a very wet day, and the rain caused the blanco to run down all over their blue uniforms. And his father was recounting that story the other day.
So I was worrying about the possibility of rain today for the floats that are coming later and the silk flags we're going to see, but I hadn't considered white paint running down people's faces. So here we have the Royal Navy. And it's so smart, and watching people march in complete unison, and the sound of it as well, the sound of their boots on the tarmac. And interestingly, the mall, pink in colour, to look like a red carpet leading to Buckingham Palace. You can hear those boots hitting the ground.
And these Navy personnel, again, men and women, have come off their ships, and this is not what they do for a living. And I've been told that when the call went out for volunteers to come and take part in this pageant, they were overrun with volunteers. And not surprisingly, these people will be able to say forevermore that they were there. They were there at the Platinum Jubilee for Her Majesty.
Seeing the Royal Marines, the amphibious troops of the Royal Navy, acknowledged as one of the world's elite commando forces.
They really are. I was privileged enough to serve with the Royal Marines for a short while in Afghanistan for about a month, and they are the most remarkable people.
Now, Brigadier, can you explain when the moment of the salute happens? I notice the Prince of Wales nods, and that's because he's not in uniform, therefore doesn't salute with his hand.
It's funny you should say that, Giles. I noticed that very sensibly the Prince of Wales has not put a hat on because he has the option of wearing a hat. But of course, every time he would take the salute, and he's been saluted 42 different times by the 42 different units marching past him, you'd have to take his hat on and off 42 times. So I think very sensibly he's settled on a nod.
Now we move on to the British Army, and it's going to be represented by 770 service personnel. We see the Life Guards leading the way, formed in 1660, and based on a group of gentlemen who accompanied King Charles II to the continent when he fled in exile. And these, the Luzon Royals, created much more recently in 1969. By the amalgamation of the Royal Horse Guards and the Royal Dragoons. Coming thick and fast, the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards, we've got Royal Lancers, we've got mass pipes and drums.
Of course, all of these units, all these regiments have an affiliation, a special association with Her Majesty the Queen. Colonel-in-Chief to many of them, the Royal Scotch Dragoon Guards and the Royal Lancers.
This is why this is so intriguing, I think. It is almost a history lesson. We've got the history of the British Isles marching in front of us. The background to so many of these groups is the story of our country.
And there the Queen's Gurkha Engineers. Again, Her Majesty is Colonel-in-Chief. Of course, the Gurkhas on operations constantly, taking their turn with everyone else.
Yeah, they fought in every major British conflict, most notably the First World War, when they gained the reputation of being the bravest of the brave.
Indeed, with 26 Victoria Crosses since 1858 to show for it.
And now we have the Foot Guards, all 5 divisions of the Foot Guard on parade today, the Grenadier Guards.
And this really is history, isn't it? Because they've served 11 kings, 4 queens, including, of course, our current Queen, Elizabeth II.
Indeed, and Her Majesty's first military appointment was Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. And of course, she's recently assumed Colonel of the Grenadier Guards again. Huge pride. Of course, the Grenadier Guards, within their ranks, within the 1st Battalion, has the Queen's Company, and they are her personal company.
Today formed of representatives from the Nijmegen Company Grenadier Guards. And we have the Coldstream Guards, and Her Majesty the Queen is their Colonel-in-Chief, and followed by
Scots Guards. Yes.
I should do not. I'm looking at them thinking, I bet they're glad it's a cool day.
Well, so many of these guardsmen were on parade for trooping the colour on Thursday.